The landlord gave me only one warning when I moved in. He said if you hear knocking after 3 in the morning, do not open the door. I thought he was joking, until I heard the first 3 slow knocks, and that was when the shock hit. My name is Adam, I am 32 years old and I work as a freelance translator, and I live alone. I have never believed in ghosts or demons or anything supernatural. I've always believed there is a logical explanation for everything. Old buildings make noise, wood shifts, pipes expand, and the human mind creates things when it is tired. That is what I used to believe. About 6 months ago, I moved to a small freezing town in Northern Europe for a long-term job. The town was quiet in a way that did not feel normal. The streets were narrow, the buildings were old and gray, everything felt still. I rented a cheap apartment in a building called Ravenswood, 7 floors. Almost no tenants. The kind of place where your footsteps echo, even when you try to walk softly. The landlord was an older man named Harold, thin, pale, and serious. When he handed me the key to apartment 27, he held it for a second, longer than necessary. Then he said something strange. If you are knocking after 3 in the morning, do not open the door. He did not smile, he did not explain. I laughed because I thought it was a bad joke. The first 2 nights were completely normal. No voices, no doors, slamming, no music. It felt like I was the only person in the entire building. On the 3rd night I woke up, suddenly knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. I opened my eyes and stared into the darkness. The red glow of my clock lit up the room. 3 in the morning, I held my breath and listened to nothing. Then again, knock, knock, knock. Slow and deliberate, I got out of bed and walked toward the front door. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty, completely empty. I opened the door quickly. Cold air touched my face. The corridor stretched in both directions, silent still. No one was there. I closed the door and locked it. I told myself it was the building settling, maybe someone on another floor. I went back to bed. Just as I started to fall asleep, I heard a whisper. Soft close right outside my door. Adam. My entire body froze. No one in that building knew my name. The whisper came again. Adam opened the door. I could not move, I could not speak. I just stared at my bedroom doorway. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me under. The next morning, I convinced myself it was stress, lack of sleep, a dream. The next night, I did not try to sleep. I sat on the couch staring at the front door, feeling the weight of the silence pressing against my ears. I kept telling myself that what happened before was only exhaustion, only stress, only my imagination breaking under isolation. But deep down, I knew the whisper had been real, because it knew my name, and it sounded close enough to feel. As the night stretched on, the apartment felt different, like the air itself had thickened, and every small sound from the walls or pipes made my heart jump, even though I kept repeating that old buildings make noise, and that fear feeds on quiet places. When the clock moved toward 3 in the morning, my body reacted before my thoughts did. My chest tightened, my breathing slowed, and my eyes locked onto the door, as if something on the other side was already standing there, waiting for the exact second to begin. Right on time, the knocking returned. Slow, deliberate, controlled knock, 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 and it did not sound distant or hollow. It sounded solid and intentional, like a hand placed flat against the wood, tapping with patience. I stayed still, pretending not to hear it, hoping that if I refused to respond it would fade away, but the knocking came again, steady, calm, confident, as if it understood that time meant nothing. Then the whisper followed, softer than before, but closer, so close it felt like breath sliding through the edges of the door. Adam. The way it said my name was not angry and not aggressive. It was curious, almost gentle, which made it worse because it sounded like something that believed it. I stood up slowly and stepped closer to the door, my hand hovering inches from the handle while my mind fought between logic and fear, telling me that opening it would prove everything was normal. The knocking stopped instantly, and the silence that followed felt heavier than before, like the entire building was listening with me. That was when I heard something shift behind me inside the apartment. A soft movement from the hallway, leading to my bedroom, not loud, but deliberate. I turned slowly and stared into the darkness of the hallway, and even though I could not see anything clearly, the shadows looked wrong, deeper than they should be, like they had weight. Then from inside my apartment, from somewhere beyond the hallway wall, I heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. Not on the front door, but from within the walls themselves. My throat tightened, and the room felt smaller, because that meant whatever had been outside was no longer separated by wood and locks. The whisper came again, but this time it was not near the entrance. It was closer to my bedroom. "Adam, you are alone." The words echoed softly, and I could not tell where the sound ended and where my thoughts began. I took a step back and felt cold air move past me, like someone had just walked by even though the room looked empty. Then I heard footsteps, slow, dragging, steady, moving across the living room floor, and each step carried weight and intention, as if someone was learning the space, memorizing it. I could hear the floorboards respond under pressure, but I could not see any body casting a shadow. The footsteps stopped a few feet in front of me, and I felt a presence there, something standing directly in front of me, close enough to touch. "Adam, open the door." The voice was mine, exactly mine, same tone, same rhythm, but empty, like it had been hollowed out. Fear rose in my chest in a way I had never experienced, because hearing your own voice spoken by something unseen does not feel possible. It feels wrong at a level deeper than logic. I ran to my bedroom and locked the door, pressing my back against it as my breathing became uneven and loud. The footsteps followed slowly, not rushing, not chasing, just walking calmly toward me and stopping on the other side of the bedroom door. Then came the knocking. Again, 3 slow, deliberate knocks that vibrated through the wood and into my spine. "Adam, let me in." I slid down to the floor, unable to respond, unable to move, feeling as though the space on the other side of the door was no longer part of my apartment but something layered on top of it. The knocking continued for what felt like hours, never faster, never louder, always patient. When the first hint of morning light slipped through the curtains, the sound stopped completely, and the apartment returned to stillness, as if nothing had happened. I stayed there long after sunrise, afraid to open the door, afraid that whatever had been there might still be standing silently waiting for me to look at it. When I finally stepped into the hallway, everything looked normal, the furniture untouched, the walls quiet, the air empty. But the mirror at the end of the hallway felt different, and when I stood in front of it, my reflection stared back at me, with a delay so slight that it could almost be dismissed. Almost. For a fraction of a second, my reflection did not match my breathing, and when I forced a nervous smile, the reflection seemed to hold its expression just a moment longer than it should. That was when I realized something had crossed the threshold, and it was no longer trying to get inside. It was already here. I stopped trying to convince myself that it was stress or exhaustion, because something inside the apartment had changed in a way that logic could not repair. And from that morning forward, every reflection, every shadow, every quiet second felt slightly misaligned, like reality itself had shifted, just enough to let something else stand beside me unseen. I avoided the mirror for hours, but eventually I forced myself to look, and when I did, my reflection stared back with the same face, the same tired eyes, yet there was awareness there that did not belong to me, and when I breathed in, my reflection seemed to breathe out a fraction too late. That night, the air felt heavier than ever, and I sat in the living room with every light turned on, trying to make the space feel normal, but the brightness only made the shadows sharper and more defined, like they were waiting for the lights to fail. The knocking did not begin at the front door this time. It began behind me, 3 slow, deliberate knocks against the wall, near the hallway, and the sound vibrated through the structure like something tapping from inside the bones of the building. I turned slowly, and as I stared at the wall, a faint shape pressed outward beneath the paint, the outline of fingers stretching gently against the surface before sinking back into the darkness. "Adam?" The whisper came from everywhere at once, sliding across the ceiling, seeping from the floor, vibrating inside my chest, and I covered my ears. But the sound did not fade because it was not outside of me anymore. The lights flickered once, twice, and then every bulb shattered at the same time, plunging the apartment into complete darkness. And in that blackness, I heard footsteps circling me. Slow, measured, deliberate. I could feel movement in the air inches from my face, and when I tried to step back, I collided with something solid, something standing exactly where empty space should have been. "Adam, you opened the door." The voice was mine, but layered with something deeper beneath it, something ancient and hollow. I tried to speak, but my throat locked, and in the darkness I felt hands press against my shoulders. Not cold, not warm, just present and steady, holding me in place. The room around me began to stretch, the walls pulling farther apart, the ceiling rising higher until the apartment no longer felt like an apartment but like a corridor without end. Doors began to appear along the walls, each one identical, each one marked with the same number written in fading paint, 27. Every door began to knock at once, 3 slow knocks in perfect rhythm, echoing into infinity. I realized then that the apartment had never been the destination, it had been the threshold, and when I opened the door days ago, something stepped through, well, something else stepped out. Across the endless corridor, I saw a figure standing still, shaped exactly like me. Height, same posture, same face, except the eyes were empty voids. Absorbing what little light existed, it smiled before I did. I felt myself being pulled backward toward one of the doors, as the figure stepped forward toward the place where I'd been standing, and in that moment, understanding hit me with terrifying clarity. It did not need to break in. It needed permission, and I had given it. The corridor dissolved and the darkness swallowed everything, and when awareness returned, I was standing behind a door listening. On the other side, I could hear footsteps pacing in a small apartment. A man moving around, unaware that he was no longer alone. I lifted my hand slowly and knocked 3 times. Slow and deliberate, and when he looked through the peephole, he saw nothing. But I was smiling, and this time, I am not the one trapped inside. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit the like button and subscribe for more scary stories. We promise the next one will be even darker.